Who aligned a corridor to a star that no longer rises? Beneath the calm face of the Sphinx, a secret waits in silence. Older than kings and dynasties, the desert wind moves softly, like breath over ancient stone, whispering names that no longer exist. Once, hands guided chisels with reverence, not for glory, but for something eternal. In those days, the horizon shimmered with light, and priests spoke of a being carved from earth to mirror the sky. Now, centuries later, archaeologists kneel in the same dust, tracing the same lines, chasing echoes of a question that refuses to fade. The Sphinx watches, unblinking as time folds upon itself, guarding not treasure, but a truth too vast for language. And still, the sands shift, as if remembering. In the stillness before dawn, the carvers rise. The air tastes of dust and stone. Their hands, hardened by work, move with rhythm older than memory. Each strike is a prayer, each breath, a vow to finish what began before their fathers' fathers. The priest walks among them, whispering the same word: balance. They do not know what it means, only that it feels sacred, like sunlight on skin. Somewhere behind the veil of labor and faith, one man senses the truth, that the statue they carve will outlive not only the pharaoh, but the gods who named him divine. Beneath the plateau lies a chamber no light has touched in centuries. Its walls hum with silence, as if the air remembers words once spoken there. Priests gathered long ago beneath a painted ceiling of stars, their voices weaving spells of alignment and order. They believed the Sphinx to be the vessel of the horizon, where the sun dies and is born again. Even now, echoes of those chants drift through the bedrock, brushing against the minds of those who dare to listen. The pharaoh's will was a law carved in sunlight. He desired a monument to his divine face, yet the builders shaped something else, something not human. As his court watched, he smiled, never knowing what truly stirred beneath his order. For the Sphinx, they said, was a guardian of the horizon, not a statue of flesh. The king's name would fade. The lion's face would remain. And in that quiet defiance, the builders carved eternity. The desert never forgets. It only hides. Thousands of years pass, and the same wind that once carried chants now whispers through cameras and tents. Dr. Halim kneels once more beneath the same sky. Her brush uncovers words too faint to read, etched into a fragment of stone near the Sphinx's paw. A symbol of balance, a line of stars, a face between lion and man. She looks up, and for a moment, the Sphinx seems to breathe again, not as stone, but as memory. Long after the last hammer strike faded, silence ruled the plateau. The Sphinx stood alone, gazing east, its stone skin cooling beneath the night sky. The builders had left, the priests had died, and still it watched. Wind filled the empty spaces between its paws, whispering to the stars that guided its creation. Far below, unseen chambers pulsed with the rhythm of the earth. A hum too deep for ears, too old for memory. When the first light of dawn touched its face, the desert seemed to tremble, as if the monument itself was breathing again. For the ancients, this was no statue, but a threshold, a listening ear between the sky and the dust. As centuries rolled like waves of dust, legends replaced memory. Travelers spoke of a whisper that rose from the Sphinx's mouth when the wind blew from the west. Some said it was the soul of the desert speaking. Others believed it was the sound of gods still dreaming. But to those who slept nearby, it was something gentler, a lullaby made of wind and time. Beneath the endless stars, the sand moved, as if alive, reshaping dunes into the shape of forgotten symbols. And every dawn, as sunlight struck the Sphinx's eyes, that whisper returned. Like a memory the earth refused to let go. Deep beneath the Sphinx's paws lies a hollow chamber carved with impossible precision. It was never meant for treasure, but for sound. When the desert wind enters from above, It creates a low vibration, a hum that echoes across the limestone walls. The ancients believed that this sound was divine language, a voice too vast for mortal understanding. Dr. Halim, listening through her instruments, feels her pulse match its rhythm. For a fleeting instant, she imagines she can hear the carver's breath, the priest's prayers, the heartbeat of the very earth itself, all fused into one quiet, eternal song. On a night when the air was perfectly still, the priest Menkar once marked the sky from the plateau. He traced the stars that formed Leo and whispered the name of each. In that moment, the Sphinx's gaze met the constellation's heart, Regulus, a star that would one day vanish from human sight. It was not built to honor a ruler, but to align the world below with the heavens above. The monument was a mirror, its purpose not to speak, but to listen, to hold the memory of light that no longer reaches the earth. The Sphinx was not a riddle carved in stone, but an answer waiting to be remembered. It spoke not through words, but through the silence between them. Every chip of limestone, every grain of sand held a fragment of something larger, a message written in alignment, not letters. Dr. Halim finally understood. The builders had carved a map of consciousness, a bridge between the mind and the stars. It was never meant to be solved, only heard. And as she stood before it, the wind quieted, the world held its breath, and the Sphinx seemed once again to listen. When Neferu slept, his dreams were filled with stars. He saw his chisel striking stone, but each spark turned into a light, drifting upward into the sky. He no longer felt his body, only the rhythm of creation itself. In that half-world between waking and sleep, a voice spoke, not in words, but in feeling. It told him the statue would outlast memory, but it must never be finished, for perfection belongs only to the gods. When he awoke, his hands trembled, and he found new cracks in the stone where none had been before. He did not tell anyone. He simply looked up at the great face he carved and whispered, "Forgive me if I make you too human." Menkar felt the air change. The statue was nearly complete, but the sky no longer looked the same. He climbed the scaffolding, his old bones shaking, and pressed his palm against the lion's cheek. It was warm, alive in a way no stone should be. He whispered to the workers below that the heavens had shifted. The star of balance was fading. They did not listen. He knew then that time itself was moving around the Sphinx like a current that once awakened, it would never truly sleep again. He prayed that when the sands returned to cover it, they would also bury what had begun to stir. The desert knows how to erase. Wind after wind came, burying the monument in waves of time. Villages vanished, dynasties rose and fell, and still, the Sphinx waited beneath its shroud. Beneath the layers of dust, dreams collected like sediment. The memory of tools, voices, and footsteps sealed away in silence. Centuries later, when explorers struck the stone again, they were not the first to awaken it. They were only the latest. The storm that once covered the Sphinx had never ended. It had only been paused, waiting for another age to begin its part of the same endless song. That night, Dr. Halim dreamed she was walking through endless corridors carved from light. Symbols floated around her like fireflies. Not words, but sounds turned visible. She saw Neferu's hands, the priest's eyes, the pharaoh's distant smile. Then she saw herself reflected in the Sphinx's eye, but the reflection did not move as she did. It only stared back, patient and calm. When she awoke, the morning sun was rising exactly in line with the statue's gaze. Her notebook lay open beside her with a single phrase written in her own handwriting. One she didn't remember writing. The stone remembers. At sunset, the wind turned strange again. Low, harmonic, almost melodic. Dr. Halim stood before the Sphinx, the same place where Neferu once stood. The sound rose from the sand, vibrating in her chest like a heartbeat. It was not speech, yet it carried meaning. A call across millennia, soft and eternal. She felt tears well as she realized it was the same hum the ancients had heard when the first stone was set. Somewhere between creation and remembrance, the monument was speaking once more. And though no one else could hear it, she smiled. The silence had finally answered. For months, the archaeologists searched without finding anything new. Then, on one quiet morning, as the first light touched the Sphinx flank, Dr. Hallam noticed a line of shadow that did not belong. It traced the outline of a sealed doorway near the monument's side, faint but exact. Her breath caught as she brushed away the sand, revealing carvings arranged like the rays of a rising sun. The door was not meant to be opened easily. It was placed for the light, not the hand. When the sun reached its perfect height, the shadow vanished, and the door shimmered with the reflection of the sky. Something inside was waiting, patient and timeless. When the team finally breached the ancient seal, air older than history escaped into the dawn. It smelled of stone, dust, and something faintly sweet, like old incense. They lowered their lamps into the hollow, and the light flickered across walls carved in perfect symmetry. At the center lay a pool of still water, mirroring the ceiling of painted stars. Dr. Halim felt an odd weight in her chest. Not fear, but recognition. The chamber was alive, not in movement, but in purpose. It was built to hold silence as others held air. She whispered to no one. "It's listen." Inside the chamber, the ceiling was not painted, but polished. It shimmered like glass, reflecting the lanterns below in perfect stillness. Dr. Hallam lifted her eyes and saw, not her reflection, but stars. The mirror showed the night sky as it had been thousands of years ago. The constellations unbroken, the stars brighter than memory. She realized then that the chamber was a celestial map, built not for worship but for remembrance. Through the reflection of light and time, the ancients had preserved the heavens themselves. A portrait of eternity before decay. As she recorded the carvings, Dr. Hallam noticed a pattern hidden in plain sight, a sequence of lines and dots etched around the chamber's edge. When plotted together, they formed a rhythm, not a picture. She recognized it as frequency, a harmonic code. The priests had carved sound into stone. When she softly hummed the tone she calculated, the air quivered. The mirrored ceiling flickered, and the pool rippled, glowing faintly blue. For the first time, she understood. This chamber was not just a monument. It was a resonance, a bridge built to carry vibration between earth and sky. As the morning sun reached its zenith, a single beam entered the chamber through a narrow slit in the ceiling. The light touched the pool, then climbed the walls in a slow dance of reflection. Every carved symbol ignited glowing gold against the stone. The chamber trembled with a soft harmonic hum, the same tone Dr. Hallam had found. Above, the Sphinx seemed to shimmer in the heat, as though the stone itself had become breath. And then, just as quickly, the light faded. Silence returned. The desert stood unchanged, yet nothing would ever feel the same again. Dr. Halim could not sleep. The sound she had heard in the chamber followed her everywhere, in the hum of her equipment, in the soft thrum of her heartbeat. She played the recording again and again, realizing that the tone was not random. It was mathematical, repeating in intervals that matched the distance between stars in the ancient constellation maps. The builders had left behind a code of proportions, a silent equation that joined heaven and earth. It was not faith. It was precision. They had measured light, and in that calculation lay something impossible. A knowledge so vast it blurred the line between science and prayer. As she compared symbols from the Sphinx chamber to those from forgotten temples, a pattern emerged. It was neither hieroglyphic nor decorative. It was musical. Every shape corresponded to vibration, every curve to tone. The ancients had written in sound, shaping language from resonance. Dr. Halim whispered one of the symbols aloud, and the sand shifted gently around her, as if moved by breath alone. She understood then that the Sphinx was built to teach through silence, not to be spoken to, but to be heard through. In its quiet, the builders had left the first language of the stars. One evening, as she stood before the mirrored ceiling, Dr. Hallam's reflection shifted. The stars above her seemed to move, rearranging themselves into a shape she had never seen. A lion's face made entirely of light. Behind her reflection stood figures of ancient builders, their outlines shimmering like smoke. They looked neither alive nor dead, but eternal, watching her in silence. For a moment she felt their memory move through her veins, their purpose, their devotion, their longing for meaning beyond mortality. When the image faded, she was weeping softly, not from fear, but from recognition. Knowledge can be as heavy as stone. Dr. Hallam began to feel the burden of what she had uncovered. The world outside her excavation waited for proof, dates, materials, evidence. But the Sphinx did not offer proof. It offered silence, the kind that reveals itself only to those who listen. She realized the truth was not meant to be claimed, only carried. The monument's power was not in its mystery, but in its patience. It had waited thousands of years for someone to hear its hum again, not to solve it, but to remember it. That night, as stars drifted into place above Giza, the hum returned. Faint, but certain. It came not from the chamber, but from the desert itself, as if the sands were singing. Dr. Hallam closed her eyes and listened. She heard the voices of the builders, the prayer of the priest, the dream of the carver, and beneath it all, a deeper sound, the steady pulse of the world turning beneath the stars. The Sphinx, silent and eternal, had never ceased speaking. Humanity had only forgotten how to listen. When she finally opened her eyes, she whispered, "We remember." Before dawn, the plateau pulsed with warmth as if the ground itself were alive. Dr. Hallam stood in silence, feeling the faint vibration through her boots. It came in waves, rhythmic and slow, like a heartbeat beneath the sand. She realized it was the same frequency carved into the chamber's walls, a living pattern, repeating endlessly. The ancients had not built a monument to the gods. They had built a message to time. It spoke in vibration, not words, reminding all who came after that everything, stone, light, and breath, shared the same rhythm. She knelt and pressed her palm to the sand. The desert seemed to answer. By the second night, the hum had deepened. It moved through the Sphinx, resonating like a distant bell. Dr. Hallam set her instruments aside. They could not measure what she felt. The sound was memory itself, the echo of countless lives, layered and bound in stone. She understood that the Sphinx was not built to guard a tomb, but to guard remembrance, the living archive of human thought. Every strike of the chisel, every breath of the worker, every chant of the priest had been absorbed into the monument's form. The builders had given their voices to eternity. In a trance between waking and sleep, she heard voices again. Not ghosts, but memories suspended in air. The sound formed words she could barely understand. Yet they carried feeling as clear as music. They spoke of light that never dies, of the bond between creation and creator, of silence as the purest truth. When she opened her eyes, she knew that she had not been dreaming. The message was clear. The Sphinx was not asking to be studied. It was asking to be remembered, as the first breath of humankind's wonder at the universe. As dawn broke, the air thickened with golden light. Dr. Hallam looked up to see faint silhouettes forming along the ridge, men and women in linen garments, their outlines shimmering like heat mirages. They did not speak, but she knew who they were. The builders. Neferu stood closest, his expression serene. Beside him, the old priest lifted his staff toward the rising sun. Their forms wavered in the light, merging with the horizon. Dr. Hallam raised her hand in silent greeting, and the figures faded back into brightness, leaving only the sound of the wind and the unbroken gaze of the Sphinx. When the last echo faded, the desert returned to silence. Dr. Hallam stood beneath the Sphinx's gaze and understood its final truth. The monument was a memory of connection. It had been built to remind those who came after that the same light lives within every being that gazes at the stars. The builders had offered their labor not to gods or kings, but to the eternal dialogue between creation and time. She smiled softly, knowing the Sphinx's message was never lost, only waiting. The wind passed gently across her face, carrying the faint hum of stone and sunlight. The desert exhaled. Warm wind drifted across the plateau, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and salt. The Sphinx stood unmoving, yet alive, its gaze forever locked upon the rising sun. Dr. Hallam sat before it, silent. She no longer sought answers. She listened to the slow heartbeat of the land beneath her. The hum returned once more, softer now, a pulse folded into the earth's breath. In that moment she understood that the message was not for discovery. It was for remembrance. Humanity was never meant to conquer mystery, only to stand in awe of it. As light moved across the statue's face, Dr. Halim thought of those who came before, of hands that once shaped this silence, of voices that once filled these dunes with song. She saw them not as ghosts, but as echoes woven into the limestone itself. The Sphinx, she realized, did not remember events or names. It remembered intention, the quiet devotion of those who built not for glory, but for continuity. Time was not erasure. It was translation. Every era would find its own reflection in the stone. And so, the Sphinx would never truly be old. At midday, the air shimmered with heat. The same slit of light that had once awakened the chamber now cast a single beam upon the Sphinx's heart. For an instant, the stone blazed as if alive, reflecting the sun back into the sky. Dr. Hallam shielded her eyes, overwhelmed by the brilliance. Then the light faded, and everything returned to calm. She smiled, realizing the ritual was complete. A cycle of illumination renewed. The builders had not created an idol, but a conversation with the sun itself. A promise that light would always return, even after the longest shadow. That night, she walked once more along the ridge above the plateau. The air was cool, the stars sharp and endless. She turned back to look at the Sphinx, its form silver beneath the moon, its shadow deep and still. She thought of Neferu's hands, of Menkar's prayers, of the nameless workers whose dreams had become stone. In their silence, she felt a strange comfort. The same sky that guided them now guided her. Time was not a line, she thought. It was a circle, endlessly folding, endlessly remembering. The Sphinx simply waited for each new dawn. As dawn broke for the final time in her study of the Sphinx, Dr. Halim placed her notebook on the sand and left it open to the wind. She looked up at the statue, its gaze unbroken, its silence infinite. She whispered softly, "We remember." And for a fleeting moment, the desert grew still, as if listening. The sun climbed the horizon and light poured across the face of the Sphinx, turning its stone eyes to gold. The hum faded into the morning breeze, blending with the heartbeat of the earth. Nothing had ended. It had only begun again.